This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. It's actually you. When the middle-aged man saw Yunxiao's face clearly, he was immediately taken aback and shouted, "Who was the one who broke the seal for you?" Yunxiao ignored his words, but turned his eyes to the cave behind him and said, "Who's inside? It's impossible for you to discover me with your cultivation." The middle-aged man's face turned cold. He was so angry that he laughed. A mere 5 stars martial grandmaster is really crazy. If you don't seek death, you won't die. The people of the ancient times can't be bullied. He shook his head for a while and said coldly, "Just as well, Elder Liu has also instructed that you cannot be allowed to stay." His aura burst out, and his sword dazzled in the morning light as he flew over. Yunxiao did not bother to talk to him. He took 2 steps forward and threw a punch at the sword beam. Bang! The middle-aged man in yellow felt his sword hit an iron wall, and the force of the impact almost knocked his sword out of his hand. He was instantly shocked, but before he could cry out in alarm, Yunxiao kicked him in the chest and sent him flying back into the cave. "The people inside, come out. Since I've been following him for so long, he's naturally not my opponent. I wonder what you're thinking by sending him out to die." Yunxiao clapped his hands and said unhurriedly, "I don't have any purpose. I'm just curious." "Humph, curiosity can kill." A cold voice came from the cave. A person slowly walked out and looked at him coldly. Yunxiao was taken aback, but then he laughed and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's a little friend who came to the Big Dipper sect with me. So you've been colluding with the Big Dipper sect for a long time. You're here for the treasure too?" This man was the goateed man. He squinted his eyes and said, "The treasures are all fake. The sect master of that generation had already used them all. I came to the Big Dipper sect for another purpose. You, on the other hand, have hidden yourself very well. If you hadn't used form displacement transposition in the courtyard and teleported those 2 bastards out, I wouldn't have discovered that you were actually an expert." "Same to you," Yunxiao said with a smile. "Since you're not here for the treasure, are you really here to watch the competition? Even I can't see through your strength. Is the tournament really that attractive?" The goateed man stared at Yunxiao for a while before he said slowly, "You are very talented and have great potential. I've never seen such a monstrous youth like you in all these years. Why don't you come with me and become my disciple? I'm sure you'll be able to break through to the rank of a martial supreme in the future and become a famous hero." He crossed his arms in front of his chest, his 5 fingers constantly moving, as if in an extremely regular pattern. Yunxiao's pupils constricted as he suddenly grinned and said, "Since you're not here for the treasure, there's no conflict between our goals. I won't stay any longer. Goodbye." After saying that, he immediately turned around, kicked his legs, and shot up into the sky like a beam of light. The goateed man's face no longer had any trace of wretchedness. Instead, he was astute and sharp. He laughed and said, "What a smart little brat. I just didn't suppress my aura a little, and you already noticed me. You're really amazing." He made a grabbing motion in the air, and streams of hazy energy shot out of his 5 fingers. What followed was the power of his domain, which made him extremely fast. In just half a breath, he had caught up with Yunxiao, and a strong pressure suddenly fell on him. Yunxiao was taken aback. Trapped by the power of the domain, he immediately felt that his primordial chi was hindered, making it difficult for him to circulate it smoothly, and every movement was very difficult. In addition, the haze spread out in the air in an instant, quickly catching up to Yunxiao and surrounding him like a cage. It was also very corrosive and kept seeping into his body. Trapped in the air, Yunxiao said with a wry smile, "You really think highly of me. I'm just a mere 5 stars martial grandmaster. Do I need to use the power of the territory? And this misty air is also your ultimate skill, right?" A trace of surprise flashed through the eyes of the goateed man, and then he said indifferently, "Can a mere 5 stars martial grandmaster cripple a martial emperor with one move? Also, that form shifting was impossible to do without 7th rank spirit power. I've always been a person who knows how to control my strength. If I can use less strength, I will never use more. You want me to use my domain because you have the right. It's not too late for you to submit to me now. I know you have a martial emperor realm thunder beast, but it's useless to me. You should think about it carefully. Yun Xiao smiled, knowing that he had encountered a difficult opponent. Moreover, the other party's faintly discernible aura was definitely not an ordinary martial honor. However, it would not be so easy to trap him. All right, I admit that my curiosity is harmful, but you're still wrong if you want to trap me. Rays of white light gushed out from his body, shooting away the mist like the sun. Even his domain seemed to be temporarily ineffective at this moment. Then, the sword chi in his hand condensed and emitted a dazzling light. He slashed forward with his sword, and the chi pierced through the rainbow. A vacuum passage was immediately opened up in the area and the mist in front of him. In an instant, Yun Xiao rushed out in a beam of light and was hundreds of meters away in just a few moments. The goateed man's face was aghast, and his eyes almost popped out. He cried out, "What?" He felt that he had overestimated Yun Xiao, but he did not expect that he had still underestimated him. Yun Xiao had torn apart his domain so easily, which was not something an ordinary martial emperor could do. What a mysterious kid. It's not that easy to escape from this old man. The man with the goatee seemed to feel that his dignity had been challenged. He let out an angry roar and rushed into the sky, chasing after them. His entire body was wrapped in a cloud of mist, and his speed was extremely fast. It was as if he had used some kind of secret technique, leaping forward in the air. Yun Xiao was taken aback. Although he had expected that the other party would not give up, he did not expect them to catch up so quickly. He had also seen through the goatee's secret movement technique. This kind of secret technique usually required one's full concentration, and it was easy to be interrupted once one was distracted. When he was less than 100 meters away from them, Yun Xiao quickly turned around and casually threw out a heaven and earth seal, which covered an area of space and pressed down hard. The man with the goatee immediately appeared from the haze. His eyes were wide open, and he angrily slapped down with his palm. A gray palm print rushed up with an overwhelming force. Boom! The entire heaven and earth seal was shattered by a casual palm strike, but Yun Xiao had managed to run a few hundred meters away in the meantime. He was so angry that he glared at her and shouted a few words before chasing after her. Yuan Gohan's delighted laughter came from the Divine Realm tablet and he said, "I can't believe that the overbearing martial sovereign vanquisher, Gu Feiyang, is being chased by a martial venerable. I must spread this news to the public in the future." "It's rare to see something strange," Yun Xiao said with a wry smile. "You'll know when you're with me for a long time. It's not the first time I've been hunted down and forced to run for my life." "Humph, you haven't changed at all. Now you only have the strength of a Wu Zong. Serves you right for offending people you can't afford to offend." Yuan Gaohan said in a very disdainful manner, with a strong sense of ridicule and happiness. "Judging from the power of the domain just now, this goateed man is at least a 5 stars martial supreme," Yun Xiao said in distress. "He's so damn troublesome." He condensed another sword light, turned around, and slashed out. He then turned around and changed his direction, flying toward a certain place. The goateed man wiped out the sword beam with a casual grab, then looked in Yun Xiao's direction and said angrily, "If I don't catch you today, I'm not Tandijuan." He searched the haze around him and chased after her. Yun Xiao had planned to escape in the direction of the sect competition, but on second thought, he suddenly changed his mind. After a few breaths, he seemed to have found a place and directly swooped down. At that moment, another Yun Xiao flew up from below. It was his starlight soul body, and the two of them fused together in an instant before flying down. "Who is it?" A cry of surprise came from the bottom of the valley, and soon, a plump figure appeared. "That's great." Yun Xiao smiled and said, "Except for Shouwei, all my friends are here." The woman rushed out as well, staring at Yun Xiao in surprise as she said coldly, "It's you? You were following us?" "You've misunderstood me," Yun Xiao hurriedly said. "I'm being hunted, so I fled here. I hope you can help me." Pursue and kill? How did you know we were here? The fat and round fellow was shocked. Who is chasing after you? Don't you have a martial emperor-level thunder-type demonic beast? Before Yunxiao could answer, a gloomy color appeared in the sky, exuding a terrifying pressure that rolled down and instantly locked on the three. The fat and round earth and the woman in palace clothing's expressions changed greatly, and they cried out in horror, Wu Zun. The hazy qi in the air was withdrawn, gradually revealing the appearance of a goateed man. He stared down coldly and said, "Oh, so you two survivors are here too. You're really all here." Big beads of sweat rolled down from the fat boy's forehead as he shivered. "You're so stubborn. This lord, we're not on the same side as him." He pointed at Yunxiao, his eyes full of resentment. Yunxiao laughed and said, "We all went up the mountain together. How can we not be partners now?" "It doesn't matter if we're in cahoots or not," the goateed man sneered. "I'll find you sooner or later anyway. I'm Tan Dijuan, I'm sure you've heard of me?" The fat and round earth and the woman's faces changed at the same time. The fat earth even cried out, You are Tan Dijuan? He's the junior brother of the Big Dipper sect leader, Zhang Linghua." Yunxiao's heart skipped a beat as he looked at the goateed man. He did not expect that there was such a relationship between them, but he seemed to have guessed something. Tan Dijuan's face darkened, and he said with hatred, "I'm not that traitor's junior brother. This old master has returned this time to take back the position of sect master that originally belonged to me, and at the same time to clean up the traitor." The fat and round guy felt great pressure and said in cold sweat, "Sir Tan, our goals are not in conflict. Strictly speaking, Sir Tan and we can be considered to be from the same sect, so please show mercy." Tan Dijuan looked at him coldly and said, "I can kill you 2 ants with a wave of my hand. What's the point of keeping you alive?" The fat and round man was a tactful person, so he immediately heard the hidden meaning in his words. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Pingyi pays his respects to Sir Tan. He is willing to serve Sir Tan at all times and pledge his loyalty to you." The woman also came to a realization and hurriedly said, "Shangguan Yuan pays her respects to Sir Tan. She is willing to serve Sir Tan and pledge her loyalty to you." They weren't stupid. If they were of no value to Tan Dijuan, they would have been turned into ashes immediately. Tan Dijuan's eyes moved from the 2 men to Yunxiao as he said coldly, "How about you?" Pingyi and Shangguan Yuan immediately released their auras and locked onto Yunxiao, as if they were his subordinates. Yunxiao smiled wryly. "I was counting on you two to help me. Why are you so unloyal?" "I'm not interested in being loyal to Sir Tan. Why don't we all go look for the treasure happily?" "My patience is limited," Tan Dijuan said. "If I didn't value your talent, I wouldn't have talked so much with you. I'll give you one last chance to make a choice." Yunxiao smiled helplessly and said, "You're a martial honor. I can't do anything to you. But if you want to kill me, you're daydreaming." "You're so arrogant." Tan Dijuan's face darkened. He was so angry that he laughed and said, "You don't know how high the sky is just because you have some talent. Today, this old man will tell you how high the sky is and how thick the earth is." As soon as he condensed his aura, the space around him was immediately locked like an iron bucket. Yunxiao felt as if he was in a solid body, and the endless pressure grew stronger and stronger. Apparently, Tan Dijuan was going to crush him to pieces with the power of space. Under the heavy pressure, Yunxiao's body began to twist and sway with the space, like a rubber band that was constantly being squeezed. Pingyi looked at Yunxiao with pity. He could see that Yunxiao was about to be crushed by the other party at any time, unable to resist at all. Tan Dijuan's expression changed slightly. His heart was in turmoil. From the outside, it looked like he was toying with his opponent, squeezing him casually, but in fact, he had used all his strength. This was the strongest spatial power he could use in his domain, but he couldn't even squeeze his opponent to death. Even an expert at the peak of the martial emperor realm would have exploded and died under such a powerful spatial compression. What was going on with this kid? While Tan Dijuan was shocked, Yunxiao was also slightly surprised. Under the pressure, his body was actually vaguely absorbing the spatial power of the other party. Although that degree of pressure was extremely uncomfortable, it was not to the point of danger. On the contrary, he felt that his body was constantly being tempered under that kind of distortion. There's actually such an effect. Does that mean I can use the living earth to suppress the space and then refine my body? Yunxiao had a strange thought in his heart, but he had no time to pay attention to the various expressions on the three people's faces. He let the space squeeze his body, feeling an unspeakable pleasure. Tan Dijuan, you're so King vicious. I'm going to die. Yunxiao's face was filled with pain as he cried out tragically. Tan Dijuan furrowed his brows and snorted. He increased the power of his domain again, trying to squeeze the man to death to vent the hatred in his heart. But, 10 minutes later, cold sweat oozed out of his forehead, and Yunxiao was still screaming from time to time. This time, even Pingyi and Shangguan Yuan could tell that something was wrong. Tan Dijuan was furious. How dare you fool me? You deserve to die. He shouted. He suddenly raised his foot and stomped down fiercely. The entire space trembled violently, and the qi jin on his foot shattered into pieces, like a curtain that had been shattered into countless butterflies that danced in the air. It was exceptionally beautiful, but the destructive power was suffocating. Pingyi's and Shangguan Yuan's expressions changed drastically, and they hurriedly dodged to the side, deeply afraid that they would be implicated. With their cultivation bases, they would basically die the moment they touched the spatial energy. Yunxiao chuckled, and a powerful spiritual power gushed out of his eyes, twisting the surrounding space. In the next moment, he disappeared from where he was and reappeared behind Tan Dijuan. Tan Dijuan turned around and kicked again. The space behind him cracked layer by layer, and the ground was crushed into powder like a huge chariot. Unhurriedly, Yunxiao teleported away again and reappeared dozens of meters away from Tan Dijuan in a flash. Suddenly, a mist seeped out of the space and surrounded Yunxiao in just a few breaths, wrapping him up and making it difficult for him to move. Yunxiao's eyes narrowed, and a hint of surprise flashed through them. Tan Dijuan sneered. Even a great alchemist has to have a time interval between two teleportations. I can tell from your attack just now that the interval was 20 breaths. It's a very short time, but it's enough for me to make a move. Yunxiao said. So what? Your fog can't stop me at all. Have you forgotten? Tan Dijuan said with a mocking expression, you can try this time. He made a hand seal, and the mist in the sky immediately began to move. It seemed to become restless and restless. Yunxiao frowned and cried out. The purifying power of the bright moon divine body spread out like the light of the moon and the stars, blowing away the mist. He said coldly, I don't see any difference. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. He was actually being hugged by a pair of big hands. The mist took the shape of a human, with no facial features to be seen, but it was more than 3 meters tall and wrapped Yunxiao in its arms. Although the light of the divine body had pierced through his body, it could not completely purify him, so it still held him tightly. The corrosive power of the mist made hissing sounds under the purifying light. It was extremely terrifying. If it were not for his abnormal physique, he would have been seriously injured and would have died. Moreover, the mist was also emitting a powerful fluctuation of primordial energy, which disrupted the frequency of the surrounding space, making it impossible for Yunxiao to teleport. Let's see where you can run to now. Aren't you very arrogant? If you have the ability, run. Tan Dijuan's face was filled with maliciousness. He raised his foot high and stomped down hard. The rumbling space shattered and collapsed toward Yunxiao, spreading out like a black passage with a terrible force. Both Pingyi and Shangguan Yuan's faces changed drastically, thinking that Yunxiao was completely finished this time. If he were hit by such a force, he would not be able to escape. Yunxiao's face was a little solemn as well. The mist stuck to him like marshmallows, and although the divine light could break it apart, it could not disperse it. The human-shaped mist was still holding him tightly. A golden eye suddenly appeared in the middle of his brows. It opened abruptly, and as it opened and closed, there seemed to be a gust of wind blowing. Shua shua. At that moment, a tornado suddenly swept up around Yunxiao. The mist that had taken form could not hold on for a moment before it was blown away and sucked into the tornado. What? Tan Dijuan and Ping Yingyi's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as they exclaimed in shock. Yunxiao performed an incantation gesture with one hand, and the whirlwind immediately rushed forward under his control, slamming into the huge force that was collapsing toward him. Boom boom boom. The collapsing force rushed into the whirlwind. Although it was hindered for a moment, it was still like a mantis trying to stop a car. It smashed the hissing wind power and crushed over. But in the process, Yunxiao teleported again and dodged the attack. The space hundreds of meters around him was shattered, and a black path was kicked out, which was slowly repairing itself. Tan Dijuan quieted down and stared at Yunxiao coldly without saying a word. That was close, Yunxiao thought to himself. If the domineering force of the collapse had hit him, he would have been crushed into pieces even if he had the supreme tyrant body. In the past, he could only use the Divine Realm tablet as a shield, which was why the tablet was constantly damaged. However, his newly refined immemorial heaven's eye had already integrated a trace of the immemorial astral wind power. Although it was only a trace, it was still the origin power of wind. The whirlwind that was formed was enough to blow away the fog, which was why he was able to escape. "Kid, who are you?" Tan Dijuan suddenly asked. He seemed to have lost his temper after a few rounds of fighting. Moreover, the methods of this young man in front of him made him have no choice but to have some concerns. They were afraid that they would unknowingly offend some major power. Yunxiao circulated the Great Expansion divine technique to replenish his consumed soul power as soon as possible, then said with a smile, "Would you believe me if I just randomly said one?" Tan Dijuan furrowed his brows. He felt that it would be harder to get something out of this kid than to kill him. However, it was indeed extremely difficult to kill him under the current circumstances. "Are you really here for the treasure?" "I just wanted to borrow some primordial stones from the Big Dipper sect," Yunxiao said with a smile. "I also wanted to see if I could borrow a teleportation array. Now, I want to see what the treasure is about." The three of them revealed strange expressions. Of course, they understood what he meant by borrow. "Are you short of primordial stones?" Tan Dijuan frowned in disbelief. In his opinion, an existence with monstrous talent like Yunxiao would certainly be the top cultivation target in the sect, and generally, there would be no restriction on the supply of resources, so he would not lack primordial stones. Even if the sect only had one primeval stone left, they would give priority to people like him. Yes, it's not just an ordinary lack." Yunxiao sensed that the other party's hostility was gradually decreasing, so he nodded and said with a smile, "I said that our goals are not in conflict. Why don't we think of a way to open the treasure together? We'll all benefit." I'm not interested. "As far as I know, the treasure has been gone for a long time," Tan Dijuan said coldly. His gaze fell on Ping Yingyi and the other, and said, "Do you guys have some random information?" "Lord Tan, it's just a map that our ancestors brought with them when they left the Northern Scorpion sect," Ping Yingyi hurriedly replied. He hurriedly took out a piece of old leather from his ring, spread it open in his hand, and handed it over.